We're here, we're queer, and we love the Lord. That's right, you're listening to Coming Out Christian, a podcast about life at the intersection of queer identity and Christian faith. This fun, faithful, and sometimes irreverent podcast is a production of Love Boldly, an Ohio-based nonprofit creating spaces where LGBTQIA+ people can flourish in Christianity. I'm one of your hosts, Siobhan Boyd Nelson, and my co-host is the Reverend Dr. Ben Hillscamp, Executive Director of Love Boldly. So join us, and let's find out who's coming out today. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of Coming Out Christian. Hello there, Ben. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing well, Siobhan. How are you?
Oh, doing so well. Happy Pride, everyone. I did warn you, it's June, which means I'm saying it all month long. In fact, all year long. But Ben, we're not actually in Pride Month because we do record our episodes early, but understanding that when our listeners are hearing this, it is the second week of June. How do you think you're going to be doing during the second week of June? And I ask you this specifically because you are a person who works the month of June.
I'm hoping that I am still doing all right. As we know, this second week of June, when this podcast or this episode will air, is actually Columbus Pride Week.
Yes.
We're gearing up for next weekend when we have the Stonewall Columbus annual Pride celebration in Goodell Park, the march, the festival, the largest Pride in the Midwest.
Yes.
Chicago can say what they want, but we are the largest in the Midwest. So I'm hoping that I'm still doing all right. We'll have just done Western Pride the day before on June 7th. Just getting ready for the big Pride of the year. Now ask me that at the end of this month or the end of June. See how I'm doing at that point.
Right. Still drinking water, still drinking lots and lots of water. Cannot emphasize that enough during the month of June. No matter what you do, if you're hanging out in the park, if you're drinking in the bars, water is your friend. I'm hoping to also be doing well at this point in June, but I'm a little bit nervous, Ben. I just tend to overextend myself and get really excited. I mean, how can you not get excited when your entire community is just everywhere? And when I see the community, I can't help myself. I just want to be there. It's
No.
FOMO. If I'm being honest, it's FOMO. I'll admit it. I've got a really bad case of it. And pride just, makes me want to be everywhere. All right. So one of the things that we get to do during Pride Month is not just celebrate with our community, but celebrate with our allies, who are so, so important. And by ally, I always say ally is an action verb. Someone is an ally not because they say they are, but because of what they do, because of how they show up, because of who they are in their everyday lives. It's part of the fabric of their being. And our guest today is absolutely one of those allies, someone that I have tremendous respect for. Becca uses she, her pronouns and is an activist at heart, working for equity and inclusion in local schools, churches, and the community at large for over a decade. Most recently, she co-founded a suburban queer-centric nonprofit and had the honor of organizing her city's first Pride event. She has also served on the board for another local LGBTQIA organization, working at the intersection of faith and LGBTQIA identity. Currently, Becca is fighting against harmful anti-trans legislation in the state of Ohio and is educating and encouraging others to do the same. Her 4 children, including her transgender daughter, are her inspiration and the spark that lit the fire that continues to burn within the dream of safety, health, inclusion, justice, and joy for all people. Welcome, Becca. Thank you so much for being here. It is such a pleasure to have you as our first ally here on the Coming Out Christian podcast.
Thank you, Siobhan, for that very kind introduction. I'm thrilled to be here today. I am honored that you all invited me to be a part of your podcast.
Yay. And I think we're going to have a really amazing conversation that folks need to hear a different perspective on the idea of coming out Christian. So, why don't we start with the first question we ask all of our guests? What is your testimony?
So that is a big, loaded question.
It is.
And in the context it is, in the context of this podcast, and our framework of coming out Christian, I would really love to focus on my experience as a mother, as an ally, in a time point in our life when our transgender child came out in our previous church. So I'll start with a little background there. We had been in a very big church in Central Ohio, someone called a mega church. And we were very, very involved as a family. All of our children, my husband and I, we were small group leaders. I had attended the leadership and theology school there. Very rooted and connected. Volunteering, serving multiple ways throughout every week. Our youngest child, around the age of 2, 3, began to present very different than our older 3 children, our older 3 boys. And that was okay with my husband and I. We were like, it's okay for boys to like pink, to gravitate towards sparkles. You can like those things and you're still a boy. And that was the narrative for years. And we just embraced our child at that time. But really at that time still had no thoughts or understanding or even believed in the potential that our child could be transgender. That just did not cross my mind in those early years. Again, I just recognized this gender variance or this draw to typically feminine normative things. Our child at that time also wanted to be around females, other little girls. Those were the people that our child wanted to befriend. And then came this last preschool kindergarten year where our daughter started saying, I'm a girl. And for a whole year, we listened and we would ask questions. How do you know that? Why are you saying that? And she would respond with things like, I just know my body's telling me so, which is pretty profound for a 5-year-old. It is. And again, we just listened. And at this point, her pleas, her heart's desire of expressing who she knew herself to be became more desperate and intense the more we weren't affirming that. Again, we weren't shutting her down, but we also were not affirming her at that time in her life. It came to the point where at home, we were allowing her to wear the dresses she desperately so wanted to wear. And when she would leave to go out in the morning to kindergarten, I would say, no, you have to wear your other clothes, and it became this struggle and this fight. At that point, I really threw myself into research. I started doing scientific research on gender nonconformity and being transgender, and I started to do theological study and started to read some other perspectives that were out there. I also met with one of the pastors at the big megachurch that we were at that time. And a big part of the shift that came for me was I knew that what she was saying was true. I knew deep down, my daughter knows who she is. And I realized the thing that was holding me back was my own fear. And I began to just really hate that inside of myself. Who am I to honor her and bless who she is in my own home, but then also be holding her back from that outside in the world? And here I am as a parent doing the last thing I want to do, which is teach my child you can't really be who you are, right? And to hide some part of yourself. And I have this vivid memory of us calling together one day, again, in this midst of this season of desperation, where she said to me, again, Mom, like, you know, I'm a girl. And I just said, I know, it's true. I know you are. And it was such a relief just to connect and affirm and validate what she'd been saying for a year now. And at that point, things kind of moved very quickly. I knew that we had to move forward. I knew that I needed to, at this time, my child was only 6 years old. So a lot of the burden of communicating with people and sharing with people in their lives fell on me and my husband. So we did that. We shared with anyone who we were gonna cross paths with in life. We shared, we're using this name, we're using these pronouns. We understand she's young, we're holding this with open hands, but we're affirming her. Like, this is, and also we're doing this because if we didn't do this, I feel like I would not have the peace of God in my soul. And I felt so strongly about that. Like, this is the direction that God is leading me as a parent and is leading me to love my child. To do the opposite, I still so strongly feel this way. Just, it would have been devoid of the way and the peace and the love of God. For me in my faith walk, but for my child and her faith walk too. And the one place where we hit this big bump in the road was at our church. We sat down with one of the pastors there early on, and the senior pastor, I should say, and he was not quite supportive. He disagreed that we should be allowing her to wear dresses or what she wants to church. He went on to refer to her as a him when he prayed that day. And he only gave us 10 minutes in between his 2 sermons that morning in the cafe to really share this. And I reached out and said we wanted to connect. And the real bump in the road came with the bathrooms. My daughter knew that she needed to use the girls' bathroom. She's a girl and she presents as a girl. And mind you, before this, she had still been going into the girls' bathroom with me at church and other places. The moment we communicated to the church about her social transition, right, name, pronouns, her getting to express herself through dress the way she wants to, they said she could no longer use the girls' bathroom. And this was devastating at the time. The children's pastor of this big, huge children's ministry was the least supportive person in the church. And he had some confrontations with my husband that were just, to put it frankly, like ugly and uncalled for. Speaking of her genital, bringing up her genital, just things that, right?
Oh dear. Yeah.
that are completely uncalled for and inappropriate. And we sat down with the whole leadership team, including this person, and they told us that they were going to need an entire year to talk through this as senior leadership team of this church. And in the meantime, if we wanted to attend, that our daughter would have to sit with us instead of go to children's church, or we would have to get paged anytime she needed to use the restroom and walk across this large church, get her and take her to a handicap designated bathroom on the other side of the church. And that was a big hell no.
Yeah,
Hell
yeah.
no. Like that was not going to happen. One, that poses the risk of like outing my child, right? Why does she get picked up? And I'm not doing that. I'm not putting her. So we said, okay, we'll wait. And we remained in these conversations with the church for a year. Not as much as I would have liked to be included at the table in their conversations. They would kind of reach out and fill us in a little bit. But this loss felt like it happened overnight. To be rooted somewhere for 13 years and just lose it instantaneously. And my older children lost this community too. They were in the youth groups. They were connected. It felt devastating and awful. And then there's the piece of, you know, we're doing what's right for our family. We have this big loss. And then you still have your community and friends who are going to this place, right? And the few that we did tell the whole story, like there were some people that did choose to walk away as well. And other people still to this day who know what happened are going there. And we waited through that year. They got back to us. After a year, they did decide, you know, we're going to move forward with allowing people to use the bathrooms that match their gender identity. So that was, I felt like the struggle wasn't in vain. I feel like there was progress and a bit of education that happened there on their end, but we couldn't go back. Yeah. We had been gone for a year and there had been too much damage done at that point. And by that time, we had grown so much in affirming our daughter, educating ourselves, building new relationships in the queer community. I was rapidly learning as an ally, and I realized we go back into this space, it would be one thing after the next. They wouldn't let her go to summer camp. They made that clear, or room with, you know,
the girls,
girls, and she wouldn't have been able to get married there. They knew she was trans, and I, at that point in my life, was like, I cannot give my time or energy or money to a place where some of my children have access to things and another one of my children do not, you know, and then does not. And then it for me at that point too extended to all people. I don't want to be in a place where other queer people are being harmed, have been harmed, you know, are told they're welcomed, but aren't actually fully included and given the same opportunities. So we did not lose our faith through that, which is great. I still love Jesus. I consider myself a follower of Jesus, but we did for 5 years. Just we didn't go to church, and we just maintained our faith here together as a family. My husband and I poured into our kids. And I continued to hold out hope that we could find a faith community, and had tried, you know, various things that didn't work out. And I think a lot of it was that especially myself, are still healing from the trauma of that experience. And it took a long time. And it still is very, very difficult to trust religious institutions and spaces and leaders to this day. I'm very wary and cautious. You know, now 6 years later, we are in a faith community that is completely LGBTQ affirming, and I am thankful for it. But it's still not easy. Yeah. And to just wrap up, I just want to add this one point about being an ally and a parent in this moment of my child coming out, because she was so young at the time, 6, and I think I mentioned this a bit before. We carried the weight, I feel like, of the coming out. And I remember when we wrote this big email to people, like telling people, now I know what it feels like for someone to be closeted, to an extent, not fully, I'm still an ally, but I can feel what it feels like to have been closeted for so long. And it's this thing you desperately want to tell people, right? Because you want to be fully known and seen and loved. You want to be safe in your world, in your community, with your people. You want to be authentic. And you can't do it because you're so afraid that you're going to lose people in relationships or be discriminated against or treated poorly. And that moment, though, like when I sent that email and people finally knew, it was terrifying, but it was also the biggest relief ever. It was so liberating to be authentic and to finally not hide this and carry this around for so long and just dance around something. And so I feel like I did get a glimpse of that coming out and coming out in general, but coming out also in Christian spaces, and just that struggle there, just again, how terrifying it is, but how liberating, and holding both of those things in tension at the same time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I knew a lot of it, but it is still so impactful to hear that story and your process as a parent of learning to affirm your child. And I appreciate the research and the work that you put into that, which isn't easy. I know that that had, as a parent, I know that that is a scary thing to have your child say something that you weren't expecting and were completely unprepared for, as most parents are unexpecting of that and unprepared to hear that. I want to go back to what one of the things you said earlier in your testimony, and that was that you did seek out theological perspectives in addition to, the medical research and things. Are there particular theological perspectives or books that were helpful for you as a parent and ally in getting to an affirming place?
I mean, one in particular is Austin Hartke's Transforming, which, specifically is in relation to transgender people in the church, in biblical history. And I think some other work from Megan DeFranza, who also does some work. She's done a lot of her scholarly work around intersex people, but that has crossed over into also inclusion for transgender people. And just some of those points theologically are like, God doesn't operate in binaries. God themselves
Amen.
is not
Yeah.
binary, right?
Right. Yeah.
Creation and nature is not binary. We don't just have day and night. We have sunrises and sunsets, and they're beautiful.
Yes.
Life wouldn't be nearly as colorful or exciting or as thrilling without those sunsets and sunrises. And going back to the Bible, we have conversations around eunuchs and full inclusion of eunuchs. And
Right.
I'm not going to quote the scripture directly right, but some were born that way, some were made that way by themselves, some were made that way by other people, and all people were welcomed, in this New Testament community, into this community of followers of Jesus. And eunuchs, historically would have been people on the margins who didn't fit into a gender binary and were treated differently for that reason. And Christ came along and his Christian community and said, no more. We welcome all people. These people don't belong on the margins. So those are probably the biggest takeaways.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'd love to offer resources for folks who might also be on this journey.
Becca, one thing that I know about your background, about your journey, is that you've sometimes had to wrestle with how do you share about your story? How do you share about your daughter's identity, while particularly with other parents and families, while still honoring where your daughter is in her life and her development? How do you negotiate
Mhm.
that? And what might you recommend for parents who are out there who definitely want to share with people, but at the same time have kids who have their own lives and have their own timing for when they want to come out and for when they want to be open?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm glad you asked it because, here we're talking about this coming out at 6. Well, she had to come out. She's going to live authentically as herself. We had to take that step. But here we are 7 years later. She is not out. And that is perfectly okay. That is her choice. She does have friends, who know that have been great support and great friends. That's her decision who to tell and who not to tell. But she is not out there saying I'm trans, at school or anywhere else she goes. Um, and again, it's a kind of difficult thing to wrestle with because we are in the same community where she did initially transition. A lot of people do know. They knew us before. They know us now. So I say she's not out, but there are a significant amount of people who naturally know. Um, but I do my best now, with her not wanting to be out, to honor her in every way we can. So, for example, just even on this podcast, we are using pseudonyms. Um, and I talk to her in instances like this. Like I did talk to her earlier this week about this podcast, ran it by her. I reassured her that we're using pseudonyms, that I wasn't using the identifiable names of people, places, things. So every time I'm going to have like a conversation that I feel like, yeah, could feel threatening to her, I make sure to have a conversation with her, and honor her and respect her feedback. And it is a difficult and fine line because I am an activist and advocate at heart. So I would be out there waving the flag and like scream, like if it were me, like that's how I would be. And I think I have found the path forward in that, though. There are more intimate connections or people who know and will connect me with someone, and I'm able to sit down with parents who are learning and have one-on-one conversations. And these are parents who, are going on a similar journey with their child or something we had experienced in the past. And I've really only made myself available in those safe spaces with safe people who genuinely want to learn and be educated or need support in some way. And again, even in those situations, I speak with my daughter about that. Like I was recently invited to share last month at this women's group. There was a lot of people I didn't know. And I managed to share on transgender youth and some of the issues they're facing, gender affirming care, around sports. And I did it all without even mentioning that I had a trans child. There goes my dog. So there are ways I can navigate that and continue to educate and do work in that space without even mentioning that I have a trans child.
And I want to say, Becca, that is the work of being an ally, right? That takes more work on your behalf to pause and be thoughtful and say, okay, this isn't my life. This isn't my identity. This is my child's identity. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to respect her wishes and where she is in her journey and who she wants to be out to. And I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
run these things by her and take her in, get her input, take it seriously, and then adjust your behavior accordingly. And I just thank you for doing that, as an ally, and as a parent. I think that's amazing on both parts.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Ben, did you have another question? You look like you're thinking. I know, I love that thinking face, Ben.
So at the risk of once again telling other people's stories, um, I wonder what you would say to parents who are struggling a bit more. Who I know you talked about just now, talked about, at one point not affirming um, your daughter's identity, your daughter's transition, and having to really research and learn about that, and then come to that place of affirming. Um, what do you say to parents who are struggling a bit more, who want to affirm, who want to celebrate their children, but whether based on faith or politics or fear about the world today, um, have that
Mhm.
fear, have that lack of affirmation.
Mhm.
Does that make sense as a question? I'm sorry.
It does. It does. Um, One, I would say almost all decisions that we make out of fear are the wrong decisions, right? Unless we're really protecting our actual lives.
Amen.
And the decisions I made in the past out of fear that kept me from affirming my child, it took me a while to get there and realize that, but I did. Um, that wasn't the right choice. Making that decision out of fear was not the right choice. Um, Stepping out of fear into courage, into truth, into love, it feels scary, but it's freeing and liberating. Um, I would also say to parents in that place, um, this is your moment to like reach out, reach out to people to learn to educate yourself. Find other parents. There are great groups out there for parents of LGBTQ kids, and there are faith-based ones. So if you're a parent and it's issue for you is you feel like this can't align with your faith, find some other parents of faith on that same journey who've gone before you, who are there in the same place as you, and really connect and wrestle that out with them. Learn, educate yourself. Again, read some scholarly theologian work from other viewpoints than maybe what you've been told in your church upbringing. They're out there and there's a lot of them. Again, I think education is a big part, like connect with local LGBTQ organizations in your state, in your city, read their resources. Um,
And we're not scary, right? Becca,
right,
I think that's
right,
something that people think that, oh no, I'm straight. I can't ask a queer person
right,
for help or for resources because they're going to yell at me because I'm not completely
right,
on board.
right.
And how have you found the queer community?
Yeah. I have never found that to be true. Like, I love my queer friends. They are the best people. They're the safest people to ask questions and be around and be authentic around. Absolutely. Um, they, my queer friends, fight for me and love me as a straight person, I'd say in greater ways than anyone else.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. So, unless Ben has another question, this might be our final one to wrap up. But something that we have heard time and again on this podcast already is, and my faith persists. That despite the trauma, despite what I had to go through, despite losing entire communities and resources and support, my faith persists.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think that is for you?
Because I know Jesus and I know the love of Jesus. And I knew that it was not the love of Jesus. It was not the love of God causing that harm in that church. It was people. It was people who had been taught something by the people before them and had been taught certain interpretations of the Bible, and it was people also living in fear, also living in misinformation and not being fully educated. And for me, that's not attributed to God. It's not attributed to God's love. I believe the divine love of God was there and always has been there. And now looking back, like I am thankful for how God guided us during that time. I'm thankful to be out of that place. Like, I'm thankful that, you know, I could have probably stayed in somewhere like that years longer, and that wouldn't have been good. I don't, that's not where we're supposed to be. And I do believe that even that's the divine work of God, and God looking out for us and our family.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Becca, for sharing your testimony and your journey with us. It is beautiful. I know that our listeners have absolutely enjoyed hearing your story and have been encouraged and inspired by it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you both for having me here. Again, it's just an honor to be here, and I love you both and the work that you're doing here.
Yay, yay. So now we're going to go into our query. Yes, that is query of the day. And I want to focus on allyship. If you know my past work, you know that I do truly love allies. And the reason I want to focus on allyship is because for some of us in our coming out process, some of us start as allies. Like, because that's like a little baby step in the process. I'm going to raise my hand and say that I am a person who started my coming out process as an ally to a friend who's my best friend and sister who came out before me. So it was like, oh, great, I'm her ally. And that's why I'm going to the gay club. Right. So that is, what is just one of your best memories of allyship, or one of your initial interactions with the idea of allyship? So for me, allyship was about, okay, this is a safe way to enter queer spaces without actually having to take the risk of coming out, but I get the benefit of being in that queer space. So that was kind of like my introduction to the concept of allyship. Ben, what was your introduction to the concept of allyship?
So for me, I was definitely not an ally before I came out. I was definitely in the particularly white man club, the lady doth protest too much group. Um, and had doubled down on perhaps not homophobia so much as, well, internalized homophobia. Let's put it that way. I was one of those people. Um, but um, it was a lot. I had a number of good friends, good mentors, teachers, professors, particularly at college, because that's when I came out, who were the ones who, whenever I would say something that was probably horrible and off color, they would be like, okay, that's, we're not going to take you to task just for that, but you probably shouldn't say that, but um, okay, we're going to continue to just kind of sit with you and stay with you until you came out. Actually, a mentor of mine, upon me coming out to her, said, "Oh, thank God. I was really getting tired of having to put up with you and your homophobia." I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
"You knew?" And she was like, "Yes, she knew."
Oh, Ben. Oh, Ben. That's
Um,
kind of hilarious. I love it.
it is hilarious. It's also kind of sad, and unfortunately, there are far too many LGBTQIA plus people who go through most of their lives, if not their entire lives, living in that place,
Yeah.
which is a really sad and dark part of the closet. Um, but at the same time, is unfortunately what some people find to maximize their safety,
Right.
for lack of a better word.
Right.
Um, but again, thankfully for me, I had allies around me who again were willing to stay by until I did come out and um, express their lack of surprise when that happened.
What about you, Becca? Do you remember your first concept of allyship and what that meant for you, or how you first encountered that concept?
Mm-hmm. So I think it was a concept for me probably even before getting involved with allyship in the queer community. before that, I was involved with anti-racism work and being an ally in those spaces and educating myself and learning. And then, as I began to educate myself about LGBTQ people, again, there's intersectionality there. It didn't seem incredibly foreign to me what is an ally, because I had been speaking and doing work in other spaces. And so I think I had already built some courage or some ability to speak or pursue actions. I love how at the beginning of the podcast you talked about being an ally is doing. It's the action part. It is not saying you're an ally. And some of that, I think, just naturally being a parent to my trans child just naturally fell into my lap, right? In the schools, I had to be an ally. I had to advocate for certain things for her in the schools from the beginning, which I'm still doing to this day. And yeah, it started with her, and then definitely moved into, now how do I act and do and be an ally to the greater queer community? What's my role there? What can I do? This isn't just about my child, it's about all LGBTQ people.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Mm-hmm. All right. We are going to go now into our moment in queer Christian history, because not only have we always been here, we've always been here in the church.
Thanks, Ron. Today's moment in queer Christian history, I want to talk about Rosemary Kahn, who is a member of the Church of Norway. She was ordained in 1976 as one of the first female priests in the Church of Norway, and the first lesbian priest as well. In 1993, when she became a bishop, she became the first female bishop in the Church of Norway, the first lesbian bishop in any denomination in the world, at least as far as we know, and the first LGBTQIA plus bishop in the world as well. A lot of people know the story of Gene Robinson, who became a bishop in the Episcopal Church in 2003. And many people will consider him the first LGBTQIA plus bishop in any denomination. But he was actually beat by over 10 years by Bishop Kahn. She had a lot of firsts along the way to being a bishop and to being just a priest in general. So definitely someone to remember, and someone who, unfortunately, I think probably because she's a woman, her story has taken a backseat to Bishop Robinson, to several other male bishops who either came out while serving as bishops or who came out after they retired. But she was out as early as 1976 when she was ordained a priest, had a partner, and was unabashedly queer as part of her ministry.
That is amazing, Ben. Thank you for shining that light on Rosemary Kahn, the first lesbian bishop in the world. Wow. The first LGBTQIA plus bishop. Yeah.
And just for the record, I may be pronouncing her last name incorrectly. I'm trying here. Danish is not
Norwegian.
Or Norse, I'm sorry, it's not something I know.
Yeah. Yes, yeah, it is a Norwegian last name, so please forgive us for any mispronunciations. All right, well, that brings us to the end of our episode. I want to thank Becca again for being here and sharing such an amazing story. Becca, is there anything that you would like to plug, let folks know about that's coming up here in the month of June or later in the year?
Well, I do want to say Happy Pride Month, everyone, and just call everyone to remember that Pride Month is about celebration, but it's also about resisting. It's also about protest. And, I don't know what things will be like in June or in the year to come, but there have been so many anti-trans legislative bills that have passed in the US over the last few years. So I would just call people to action, to educate yourself about what's going on in your community, in your state, and now at our federal level in our country. And from there, educate others. Do the work. Write your city council people, write your state representatives, write your Congress people, make the phone calls. Combat all of the misinformation and disinformation that's out there surrounding trans people. There's so much of it. There's so much propaganda out there. And it's just incredibly harmful. Stand up and speak up where you can. And just, move towards love and inclusion and educating others.
Absolutely. And find someone like Becca. If this seems intimidating, if this seems difficult or hard, or if you have some fear around this idea of being an activist, of speaking up, of leaving a harmful situation, seek out someone to do it with you. I'm a big fan of teamwork and the buddy system, especially when it comes to hard, scary things. And I think folks like Becca in our community are always out there willing to be a resource and willing to stand with us and to fight with us. And that's what makes you an ally. So,
that's right.
Yep. All right. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you, listeners, once again for joining us for another episode of Coming Out Christian.
Thank you for listening to Coming Out Christian with Siobhan Boyd Nelson and me, Ben Hillscamp. Do you want to see content like this continue to be produced? Then please support Love Boldly with a donation and consider becoming a monthly donor. You can donate online at www.loveboldly.net/donate. Join us next time as we continue to engage with people who proudly say that we're here, we're queer, and we love the Lord. And we're not going anywhere.